I grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania, the kind of place where people don't lock their doors and neighbors wave when you drive by. My best friend Ryan lived just 2 streets over, and almost every weekend we'd hang out, either playing basketball in his driveway or sneaking into the woods behind his house to camp out. It wasn't anything fancy, just cheap tents, a lantern, and some snacks, but we loved the idea of being out there on our own. We were both 19 that summer, old enough to feel like adults but still young enough to think nothing bad would ever really happen to us. One Friday in July, Ryan suggested we spend the night out in the woods again. "Let's do the clearing by Miller's Creek," he said. "It's way quieter than the usual spot." I didn't argue. The creek ran behind an old trail people rarely used anymore, and it was far from the houses. We thought it would be peaceful. Looking back, that was the last thing it turned out to be. We packed light, 2 sleeping bags, a cooler with sodas and sandwiches, and Ryan's little Bluetooth speaker. We set out around 6 in the evening, laughing and joking like always. The sun was still up when we found the clearing. It was bigger than I remembered, with soft grass flattened in certain areas, almost like people had camped there before us. We set up near the creek, close enough to hear the running water but not so close that we'd get damp. It felt perfect at first. By the time the fire was going, the sky had faded to purple. Ryan was grilling hot dogs on a stick and telling me about some girl he'd been messaging. I was half listening, half playing with the speaker, putting on an old playlist of rock songs we both liked. For a while, it was just that, music, food, and the kind of dumb conversation you only have with your closest friend. If the night had ended there, it would have been one of our best camping trips. But then I heard it. It was faint at first, almost like humming. I turned the speaker down, thinking maybe it was just a bird or some kind of insect. But the sound didn't fade. It grew a little clearer, almost like a person trying to hum a tune under their breath. I looked at Ryan and saw he'd heard it too. We both froze, our hot dogs forgotten. The sound was coming from the trees just beyond the firelight. Ryan whispered, "You hear that, right?" I nodded. We both grabbed our flashlights, but when we aimed them toward the trees, the sound stopped. The woods went quiet, too quiet, really. Even the bugs seemed to shut up. My skin prickled, and I tried to laugh it off, but it came out nervous and shaky. "Probably just someone walking the trail," I said. But even as I said it, I knew how wrong that was. No one came down here this late, especially not on a Friday night. We tried to go back to normal. Ryan turned the music back on, and we played a few rounds of cards. The fire popped and cracked, giving us something else to focus on. I almost managed to convince myself it was nothing, until a stick landed in the middle of our campsite. It didn't fall from a tree, it had been thrown. Both of us jumped to our feet. Ryan shouted into the dark, "Whoever's out there, knock it off." His voice sounded braver than I felt. The only reply was the sound of footsteps, slow and heavy, moving away into the woods. I told Ryan we should pack up and move. He shook his head, saying it was too dangerous to hike back in the dark. Instead, he handed me the can of bear spray we always brought and told me to keep it close. "It's just some idiot messing with us," he said, but I could tell he didn't believe it. His eyes kept flicking toward the tree line like he expected someone to step out any second. Eventually, we decided to take turns keeping watch. Ryan volunteered for the first shift, so I climbed into my tent and zipped it up. I tried to sleep, but my mind kept replaying the humming, the stick, those footsteps. I must have dozed off anyway because the next thing I remember is waking up to the sound of someone outside my tent. I opened my eyes, groggy and confused, and saw a shadow leaning over me through the thin fabric. For a second, I thought it was Ryan. "Is it my turn?" I mumbled. but the figure didn't answer. It just stood there, head tilted, watching. Then the zipper moved. The zipper slid up fast, and the shadow disappeared. For a split second, I lay frozen, staring at the tent's flap, my brain still struggling to catch up. Then I sat up, heart pounding, and called out softly, "Ryan?" No answer. Only the sound of steady footsteps crunching in the dirt, moving away from my tent. I scrambled out, flashlight in one hand, bear spray in the other. The fire was completely out. The clearing was darker than I'd ever seen it. I swung my light around, and my chest tightened when I saw Ryan's tent, zipped up, still. I unzipped it fast and found him curled in his sleeping bag, sound asleep. I shook him until he woke, groggy and annoyed, until he saw the look on my face. "Someone was just here," I whispered, looking into my tent. He sat up straight, instantly alert. "What do you mean someone? Like a person?" "Yes, a person." My voice cracked. "It wasn't you. I saw them, standing over me." Ryan swore under his breath and pulled on his shoes. He grabbed his flashlight and scanned the clearing, but nothing moved. Nothing made a sound. The forest felt like it was holding its breath, waiting. We stood back to back for a few minutes, lights sweeping the trees. Then it happened again. That humming. Low and broken, like someone trying to sing without knowing the tune. It came from somewhere deeper in the woods, not too far off. Ryan's face went pale in the beam of his flashlight. "We're not staying," I said firmly. "We need to go now." But Ryan shook his head. "Walking out in the dark? That's worse. Whoever's out there could be waiting for that. We'll hold out till morning." He held up his can of spray like it was going to save us. I wanted to argue, but deep down I knew he was right. Hiking blind through the woods with someone following us wasn't smart. So we decided to stay in the same tent for the rest of the night. We grabbed my sleeping bag, hurried into his, and zipped it shut. Sitting there in the dark, shoulder to shoulder, neither of us said much. We just listened. Every crack of a branch, every rustle of leaves sent my pulse racing. Hours passed like that. I thought maybe things had calmed down, maybe the person left, until I heard it again. Not humming this time. A slow, dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled across the dirt outside. Then silence. Then 3 light taps against the fabric wall of our tent. Ryan's hand clamped on my arm. We didn't breathe. The taps came again, softer this time, moving toward the back of the tent. Then they stopped. I whispered, "If they come in, spray first, ask questions later." Ryan cut me off. His voice was shaking. We stayed awake the rest of the night, barely speaking. When the first gray light of dawn slipped through the tent fabric, we didn't waste a second. We packed in silence, not even bothering to eat breakfast, stuffing everything into our bags any way we could. The woods were still, like nothing had happened. But I swear I felt eyes on us the whole hike back. When we finally reached the car, the relief was so strong it made me dizzy. Ryan turned the key, and the engine roared to life. We didn't talk until we were halfway back to town. "That wasn't an animal," I said finally. "No," Ryan agreed, eyes locked on the road. "It was someone. And they wanted us to know they were there." Neither of us suggested camping again. Not that summer, not ever. But the story didn't end there. A week later, Ryan called me late at night, his voice tight with panic. "You need to come over," he said. "Right now. Something's happening again." When Ryan called me, I was half asleep. His voice jolted me awake. There was something in the way he spoke, low, rushed, like he didn't want anyone else to hear, that made my stomach drop. I grabbed my keys and drove over, the whole ride feeling longer than it should have. His house sat at the edge of the neighborhood, right where the woods started, the same woods we had camped in. When I pulled up, all the lights inside were on. Ryan was waiting for me at the front door, barefoot, hair a mess, eyes wide like he hadn't slept. Before I could even ask, he yanked me inside and locked the door behind us. "What's going on?" I said. He didn't answer right away. He just led me to the kitchen, where the blinds were pulled down tight. His phone sat on the counter, screen cracked, like it had been dropped. Finally, he said, "It's him. From the woods." He followed me. I felt the blood drain from my face. "What do you mean? How do you know?" Ryan ran a hand through his hair and pointed to the back door. I was in my room around midnight. I heard that humming again. Same as out there. At first, I thought I was imagining it. But then I looked out my window, and he was standing in the yard. Just standing there, in the dark, looking up at me. I dropped my phone, that's how the screen cracked. By the time I looked again, he was gone. I tried to calm him down, saying maybe it was just a neighbor, maybe someone pulling a prank. But Ryan shook his head hard. "No. It was the same guy. I know it." We sat in silence for a while, listening. Every creak of the house made us jump. I kept glancing at the window blinds, half expecting a face to press against them. Ryan made coffee just to give his hands something to do, but neither of us drank it. Around 1 in the morning, there was a knock at the door. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. Both of us froze. Nobody came by this late, not here. Ryan mouthed, "Don't move." We stayed perfectly still. The knocks came again, louder this time. Then silence. After 5 long minutes, Ryan grabbed the bat he kept by the couch and whispered, "I'll check the front." I didn't like the idea, but I followed him anyway. We peeked through the peephole. Nothing. Just the empty street, washed in yellow porch light. No car, no person. But when we turned back, we both saw it at the same time. A shadow shifted across the backyard, right outside the sliding glass door. We didn't breathe. The curtain swayed as if someone brushed against it. "Call the cops," I whispered. Ryan shook his head. "What do I say? Some guy's humming outside my house? They'll never take it seriously." His voice cracked, though. He didn't believe his own words. We stood there, staring at the curtain, waiting for it to move again. It didn't. After a while, Ryan forced a laugh, weak and shaky. Maybe it was the wind. Neither of us believed that. But we didn't open the curtain to find out. Instead, we stayed awake until the sun came up, just like we had at the campsite. When morning finally broke, the yard looked normal again. No footprints, no broken glass, nothing. I left only after Ryan promised to stay with his older brother for a few days. He looked exhausted, and so was I. But the whole drive home, one thought kept circling in my head. If he really was out there, watching us both nights, what does he want? I kept thinking about it for days. I checked my phone for missed calls, watched the road whenever I left the house, and walked a little faster to my car at night. I told myself to calm down, to not let fear run my life, but the truth was I felt watched in small ways I couldn't ignore. A shadow at the edge of my vision. A car that seemed to be a little too slow at the stop sign. Little things that made the hairs at the back of my neck stand up. A week after Ryan stayed with his brother, I drove out to the hardware store to buy motion lights for my porch. I told myself it was practical. I installed them that evening with hands that shook more than I liked to admit. When the lights clicked on, the porch felt less vulnerable. It felt like a small victory. I left one light on overnight and told myself that would be enough. But at 3 in the morning, the light snapped on and woke me. I sat up, heart racing, and looked out the window. Nothing. No car, no person, just the street, empty and quiet. I laughed at myself for being paranoid and went back to bed, but I couldn't sleep. 2 nights later, I was driving home from work when my headlights caught something on the shoulder of the road. A man stood by the trees, and for a terrible second my breath stopped. He had the same long, weird way of standing that I remembered from the clearing, head tilted, shoulders loose. He wore a dark coat even though it wasn't cold. I slowed the car, thinking maybe he needed help, then saw him lift his hand like he was humming under his breath, a motion I couldn't explain. I didn't stop. I didn't want to see him close. I drove faster than I should have and my hands were white on the wheel until I got to my street. That night I called the police. I told them about the campsite, the humming, the knocks at Ryan's door. They took my statement and said they would increase patrols in the area. It felt good to say it out loud, to put it on record, but it didn't make the fear go away. If anything, making it official made me feel more exposed. A few days after that, I got a message from an unknown number. No words, just a photo. It was taken from inside a tent, my tent, the fabric and the zipper visible in the shot. I stared at my phone until my eyes hurt. Ryan's name flashed across my mind like a warning. I saved the number and forwarded the photo to the police. They told me to come down to the station. For the first time since all this started, I felt like someone was taking it seriously. At the station, they showed me other reports from nearby, strange noises, people seeing someone in the trees, and one person who said someone had tried to follow them home. They set up a plan. Patrols would be increased at night, and plainclothes officers would drive through the area. They asked me if I'd be willing to set up my phone to record and to let them know if I saw the man again. I agreed. I wanted him caught as much as I wanted to be safe. That week I slept with the lights on and the phone on my chest. I kept thinking of the face in the tent, that blank watching look. It felt personal, like a violation that had no easy fix. Then, one evening as I walked into the corner store to buy milk, I saw him. He was standing at the end of the aisle, a little hunched, looking at cans like he wasn't sure what to pick. He looked smaller in the fluorescent light, not as tall as I had imagined, but his eyes, when they flicked up to meet mine, were steady, and the humming started quietly in my head. I felt the blood rush out of my face. I didn't make a scene. I left the milk on the counter and walked out. Outside, my hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold my keys. I called the non-emergency line, told them where I was, and asked an officer to come. The man walked out of the store a few seconds later. He didn't run. He didn't try to hide. He started down the parking lot toward the trees, moving with that same slow, deliberate pace. I followed at a distance, my heart hammering. By the time I reached the edge of the tree line, 2 squad cars rolled up with lights flashing low. Officers jumped out and moved quickly. The man turned and looked at us, and for 1 second I could see his face clearly, thin, pale, with a look that wasn't quite right. He didn't resist when they took him. He didn't shout. He simply hummed under his breath, the same little tune we had all heard in the woods. They arrested him for stalking and trespassing. They found more than I expected when they searched a small shack he'd been using near the creek, photographs of campsites, thrown sticks, and a cheap camera with pictures of tents and sleeping bags. There were notes too, scribbled in messy handwriting, names and places and times, like someone was keeping a diary. Sitting in the back of the patrol car, I felt a relief that was almost physical, like a weight had been lifted. But the officers also told me something that didn't make me feel better. He had no stable address, no real ID. He'd been moving around for months, sleeping in abandoned places. The records showed a history of odd behavior but no serious crimes, until now. The detective looked at me with tired eyes and said, "We'll do what we can, but people like this are hard to pin down." I left the scene and went home with my hands in my pockets, trying to hold on to the small thread of safety the arrest had given me. As the police drove him away, he kept humming that same thin song, and it followed me down the road like a bad memory. I slept better that night, but sleep was thin and broken. The next morning, I checked the news and saw a short item about the arrest. It felt official enough, but when I closed the browser, I still had the feeling that catching him was only part of the story. Something in me had shifted. Something that used to take comfort in small freedoms now held tight to the lights and locks. For a few weeks after the arrest, life almost went back to normal. Ryan came back home, and we started hanging out again. We didn't go near the woods, though. Just the idea of being out there made my stomach twist. We stuck to the driveway, the porch, anywhere with light and neighbors nearby. Neither of us admitted it out loud, but the truth was simple: we didn't trust the dark anymore. Then one evening, Ryan called me. His voice was calm, but there was something in it that froze me. He said, "They let him go." I sat down hard on the edge of my bed. "What do you mean, let him go?" "They didn't have enough to hold him. Just trespassing, stalking, misdemeanors. He served a few days, and that's it." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. My room felt smaller, the air heavier, as if the walls were closing in. Finally, Ryan whispered, "He knows where we live." That night I didn't sleep. Every creak in the house sounded like footsteps. I checked the locks 3 times. The motion lights outside kept clicking on and off, sometimes with no one there. I told myself it was just the wind, but my heart refused to believe it. The next day, I went to the police station and demanded answers. They assured me they were keeping an eye on him, but it was clear he wasn't their priority. People like him slipped through cracks all the time, they admitted. The words didn't comfort me, they scared me more. If the police couldn't keep him away, who could? A week later, Ryan stopped answering my calls. I drove to his house one evening and found his front door locked, lights off. I left a dozen texts and voicemails, but he didn't respond. It wasn't until the next morning that he finally called me back. His voice was hoarse, raw, like he'd been crying. He was outside again, Ryan said. Just standing there. "I didn't call you because I didn't know what to do." He didn't move for hours.